25 August, 19 September, 1944, Brest, Brittany, France, US. 8th Corps Marge, General Troy H. Middleton vs. German garrison Genelt Hermann Bernhard Ramke Corps. Artillery heavy batteries, including 240mm Howitzer M1 in direct support. Dawn sits low over granite and gun smoke. Wind off the harbour. A road choked with tractors, prime movers, cables cribbing. The piece arrives in 2 hulking loads, barrel and carriage, each on its own transporter. Soldiers move like ants around a boulder. They speak in short bursts over engine noise. Check the spirit levels. Block the wheels. Swing the barrel. Pin the trunnions. The 240mm Howitzer M1 grows from parts into a single black silhouette. It looks less like a gun than a verdict. Range plotters crouch over maps. Forward observers call in bearings from a church spire scarred by splinters. The target is stone and earth and concrete layered through centuries. Forts that watched corsairs and coal ships now watch an American siege. The first fire mission is not a flourish. It is a checklist. Elevation set, deflection set, powder increment checked twice. The projectile, about 360 pounds of steel and explosive, rises on a hoist, kisses the breech, disappears into the dark. Stand clear. Fire. The recoil smashes back, slows, returns home against buffers. The blast flattens, grass shakes, dust from helmets punches the air in the lungs. A slow count. Observers call the fall. Splash right, short. Adjust 100 left, add 50. Fire. For effect. High over Brest, a black dot arcs and falls. There is a breath where even gulls seem to hang. Then the fort lifts from itself, not a Hollywood fireball. A deep concussion, a dirty rows of debris roof plates jumping like cards flicked off a deck. The echo arrives late and keeps coming, rebounding off casemates and quays and stone streets. Men inside the fort do not debate calibers now. They crawl deeper. They wait for the next one. This is the scale that photographs rarely explain. The shell nose drills into concrete before it speaks. It pries at rebar. It shatters voids into fragments and dust that fill the airways. Doors jam in their frames. Rangefinders slip out of collimation. A corridor turns into a broken letter Z. A turret that shrugged at 105mm feels tired, then stubborn, then cracked. A battery commander inside counts the interval between hits like heartbeats and knows the count is shortening. Around the gun, the choreography does not stop. The weapon has its own logistics gravity. Trucks bring rounds and bag charges. Crane swings. Powder handlers keep a measured dance to avoid sparks and sweat. The crew measures heat in the tube, waits the required minutes, then works again. The aiming stakes in front of the position glow faintly as the sun steepens. You can smell creosote oil, hot canvas, salt. An infantry captain visits the gun line. He does not need a lecture about penetration tables. He needs a hole in a wall that has mocked his mortars all week. The battery commander listens, nods once, and walks back to the instrument line. The next mission writes itself. Same target group, new point of aim, walk rounds across the gorge, break the countermine gallery. The captain leaves with a fresh map and a time. The infantry will move when the echo stops. Not far from here, a second piece digs in on a hill that never asked for this weight. The ground complains. Engineers lay timber, steel grillage and fill. The howitzer squats on it like a squat courthouse on a town square. Every solution is heavy. Every correction costs sweat. But the result is simple, a barrel long enough, a charge deep enough, a shell brutal enough to argue with forts that thought they had heard everything. Brest will still take days. There is no miracle. There is only force applied with patience. Numbers tell part of the truth. Max range over 23 kilometers. Projectile mass that turns geometry into stress and then into cracks. But the story is also sound and feeling. Crewmen learn the cadence of the mount returning to battery. They feel when a traverse is smooth or gritty. They trust a bubble level more than a sermon. They eat standing up. They sleep in fragments. They live inside a cycle of lift, load, ram, lock, fire, check, adjust, repeat. The enemy listens too. German reports from concrete galleries note ceilings, flaking lamps, blown-out ventilators seizing under dust. Machine gun positions go blind when their embrasures sprawl inward. A casemate that can still shoot cannot always communicate. This is not decisive in an afternoon. It is decisive across a week when water runs low and stretcher teams cannot cross the inner court without helmets ringing like bells. By afternoon, the light shifts. The observers adjust again. A last volley rips at a caponier where a stubborn field gun has barked at the harbour all morning. Silence follows. Not victory, but a very usable silence. An infantry signal light blinks from a ruined attic. The battery commander studies his watch. He calls for a smoke mission to mask the assault trench that must cross open ground. The heavy guns are not alone. They do not pretend to be. They are one heavy hand in a larger push. Somewhere behind the line, a clerk updates a fire log. Rounds expended, tubes inspected, targets neutralized, suppressed, or simply worried into silence. He writes it in neat block letters. The page says Brest. Tomorrow it may say Metz. The handwriting will not change. The sound of the gun will not change. Forts will still be forts. The argument will still be weight against, will concrete against, steel distance against sight. And the 240mm will still speak in a flat official voice that turns stone into dust. The gun line cools. The logbook closes. Nightwork lamps blink alive. In the pause, the story runs backward. Back to the sketches, the castings, the jigs that had to be invented before a single shell could fly. It is a decision that begins years earlier, with steel chemistry, machine tolerances, and rail weights scrawled on chalkboards. Engineers faced a simple, brutal equation. To break reinforced concrete at military thickness, one needs mass sectional density and a fuse that survives the plunge. The answer grew into a barrel long enough to ring speed from a separate loading projectile and a recoil system that would not kick the carriage into the next county. Hydropneumatic cylinders big as a man drank the shock and gave it back slowly. Trunnions sat low to keep the centre of gravity honest. The cradle carried the weight like a bridge carries a road. Everything around the barrel became a problem to solve. How to move it, road rail, beach causeway, without breaking the country it crossed. How to assemble it forward without a factory roof. How to feed it when every round was the size of a small anvil. Answers multiplied. Break the system into 2 road loads, barrel and recoil, on one transporter carriage and trail on another. Use cranes or A-frames to marry them. Lay timber mats and steel grillage to keep soft soil from swallowing the jack pads. Standardize the bag charges so powder temperature corrections could be made without a guessing game. Crew drills followed. Nothing about a 240mm is casual. The rammer must be square. The gas check pad must seat clean. The breech must be immaculate, or the next shot writes a different kind of report. Aiming is not romance. It is instruments, a collimator, a deflection finger, a level bubble that rules like a tyrant. The section chief hears nothing but numbers until the order to fire cuts the air, and the mount heaves like a landed whale and slides back into battery as if pulled by an invisible rope. Back at the proving grounds, flat horizons, wind in grass tables had been built one figure at a time. Range against charge, charge against pressure curve, pressure against tube life. Steel had limits and men respected them. If slow fire kept the barrel true for more days, slow fire it would be. If bore condition drifted, cleaning rods and gauging plugs came out like instruments in an operating theatre. A heavy howitzer was not a sprinting weapon. It was a ritual, and the ritual delivered repeatable ruin far away. Doctrine caught up with engineering. Infantry commanders asked a question that never goes out of style. How do I make that wall stop being a wall? Corps artillery answered with numbers and maps. The heavy pieces were assigned to the thickest work coastal forts, inner citadels, gallery casemates, bridge abutments that shrugged at medium guns. The fire plan at Brest did not appear by magic. It was an inheritance of calculations, misfires, studied charges, corrected fuses, adjusted so that the shell dove survived, and then did its work inside the target where stone is weakest. Every choice had a cost. Mobility slow, concealment limited, ammunition tonnage brutal. But when the march ended and the base was laid and the sight bubble went true, the exchange rate was uncanny. A few rounds to silence a gallery that had pinned an advance all morning. A short series to lift a caponier that made a road junction unlivable. The weapon did not win battles alone. It made solutions possible that had been impossible an hour earlier. On the line near Brest, one crewman runs a hand along the mount and feels the warmth still in the steel. Out beyond the harbour, a gull wheels through powder haze. It requires only the next fire command the next set of numbers. In workshops far to the rear, machinists cut threads for breech rings with a patience that looks like prayer. In depots, powder men check temperatures and log them in neat script. In a classroom, a young officer learns the difference between a graze and a delay fuse and why it matters when the target is layered concrete with an air gap. The behemoth was not born angry. It was born exact. And because it was exact, it could be trusted in places where trust had to be earned under cliffs against river citadels, in city belts of stone and steel that had ignored everything smaller. The piece beside Brest breathes in the night metal ticking as it cools. A runner brings a message from the observation post, new coordinates, new tasking at first light. The crew chief reads it once, folds it and tucks it into the log. He points at the powder detail. He points at the crane. The ritual begins again. Morning again, new map sheets, new grids. Brest fades behind the column. The behemoth keeps moving. Another fortress belt waits inland, where rivers knot around old citadels and ditches. The howitzer does not argue about geography. It only asks for bearing and charge. Italy first, winter stone and rain. In the battles along the Gustav Line and later at Anzio, the problem wore many faces, but shared one skull-reinforced concrete nested in rock. Corps artillery stacked batteries by caliber, saving the biggest voices for the hardest words. The 240mm came in like a locksmith with a sledge tasked against galleries that had shrugged at 105 seconds and 155 seconds. Observation posts called splinter reports embrasures, blown wider internal doors, sprung on their hinges, stairwells collapsed into powder. Infantry diaries talk in plain language. After the big ones we could move, not triumph. Access. A hallway, where there was no hallway. A gun pit silent that had not been silent in weeks. North and West France again. Summer breaks, then September leans cold. The Moselle curls around Metz, and the forts look exactly like what they are, survivors from another century improved with steel and deeper concrete. Third Army stares across water and earthworks while rain sweeps the glacis. Heavy guns rumble forward, lay their timber, and settle in under camouflage nets that never fool a practiced eye. The target list reads like a directory of stubborn places. Driant Jean d'Arc Saint-Quentin Plapville. The method is patient. Register. Adjust. Probe with delay fuses. Change point of impact by meters, not guesswork. Watch for dust venting at the same seam. Each time there, that is the weakness. Against these forts, the 240mm does not promise miracles. It delivers effects that add up. A counterscarp gallery goes blind when its periscope head shatters and spalls inward. A caponier falls quiet after a deep hit turns its inner wall into a cone of fragments. Communication tunnels clog with collapse. A machine gun that could blanket an approach for hours now coughs in short, uneven bursts. Infantry cross a ditch under a sky that still feels hostile. Engineers drag ladders to a wall that suddenly has handholds. At Metz, everything is expensive. The heavy howitzer pays some of the debt in advance. Brittany again Cherbourg after the landings. The fight tightens into a ring around coastal forts whose casemates face the sea and now uncomfortably face land. The big gun works inland where observers can see plunging hits. When the shell arrives, it digs before it speaks. There is no glory in the geometry, only leverage. Concrete is strong until it is not, and when it fails everywhere at once. Smoke squeezes out of seams that looked tight. Antennas bend like grass. Even when a fort refuses to surrender, its ability to hurt becomes episodic, then unreliable, then ceremonial. Across these cases, the pattern repeats local, specific, measurable. No banner headlines about a single shot turning a campaign. Instead, a ledger of tasks break an observation cupola that has ruined 2 crossings. Knock out the inner wall of a countersunk gunroom. Lift a section of curtain wall just enough that assault teams can plant charges where they count. This is not decisive in a novelist's way. It is decisive, in an infantryman's way, Remove the thing that is killing you now, so that the next necessary thing can happen. The weapon's psychological wake is real and ugly. Reports from defenders note not only damage but behavior. Men forced into deeper chambers, the tempo of counterfire, sagging runners delayed because corridors choke with dust. A fort commander writes that his ventilators cannot clear the air after multiple heavy hits. Filters clog, men retch, telephone calls fade into coughs and static. Under that rain, even veteran crews hesitate to man openings that once felt invulnerable. The math changes. So does the will. None of it is easy on the American side. To emplace a 240mm within range of a fortress belt means roads groaning under transporters, engineers carving platforms out of mud camouflage that must at least delay enemy eyes, and ammunition columns strung out like beads on every end road within 20 miles. Counter-battery comes back hard. A heavy position cannot dance, it can only harden. The crews learn to read the sky for incoming and the ground for tremors that hint at a near miss. They sandbag. They dig. They keep the routine intact because routine beats panic every hour of the day. Then Manila stone and steel in a city grid. Urban fortitude turns into a maze of reinforced buildings with fields of fire down long streets and over courtyards that become pits. The lesson holds where precision air will not risk friendly lines and medium guns cannot reach into a building's bones. Heavy artillery writes the argument in deeper ink. Delay fuses work again, finding the interior volume detonating after the plunge, turning rooms into static and dust. Assault troops mark breaks with chalk and hand signals and push through. Everywhere the 240mm goes, it leaves the same signature, a deep square bite, taken out of a place that was built to resist. Sometimes the answer is enough on its own. More often, it is the brick that loosens the arch. Infantry engineers and tanks move through the openings. Commanders draw thicker lines on the map where yesterday they scribbled arrows that ended in question marks. In fortress warfare, that is what victory looks like, not an epiphany but an accretion. And always the ledger time to emplace versus time saved in assault, rounds expended versus positions neutralized, tube wear versus walls that will never shoot again. The calculus never flatters, it only balances. When it balances in your favor, a bridgehead grows, a gate opens, a fort's voice cracks, and then is gone. September, December, 1944, fortified belt of Metz, Moselle, France. U.S. 3rd Army, Lieutenant Gen. George S. Patton, Jr. XI and XX Corps. Artillery heavy battalions with 240mm Howitzer M1 supporting assaults on forts Driant, Jeanne d'Arc, Saint-Quentin, and Plappeville. Night rain on steel. A canvas cover slaps the barrel like a flag with no country. The crew sleeps in shifts, and history keeps walking past them. When the Metz forts finally fold, piecemeal, stubborn, always at a price, the big guns do not claim credit. They mark pages. They move again. But in the log books and staff histories, a pivot starts to show, a sense that the heaviest hammer will not always be the first tool fetched. Aircraft circle lower. Bombers return with heavier payloads and better fuses. Fighter bombers learn the seams of concrete like surgeons. Radar finds what eyes cannot. The argument changes. Where a 240mm once spoke across 20 kilometers, a squadron now arrives overhead and writes its own geometry. Steep angles, timed drops, delayed bursts. The howitzer is still there, but not always first in line. Then the war ends. Europe's forts quiet. Coastal guns go dumb. In depots, tar turns sticky on parked carriages. The army counts barrels and budgets. Mobility climbs the chart. Weight drops. The old behemoth waits, while staff officers draw a new world with thinner lines and faster arrows. Rockets appear simple steel sticks at first, then guided promises. The 240mm does not argue. It simply takes more road than anyone wants to give. Doctrine swings hard. Corps artillery shrinks. Divisions carry what they can move in a hurry. 8-inch howitzers and 155 seconds own the middle ground, enough punch, far less burden. New tubes arrive with higher rates of fire and easier roads. Then missiles, honest to their era, imprecise by later standards, eat part of the mission. The map favors speed. The trucks agree. The 240mm nods like an old craftsman who knows he has been right for a long time, but also knows the shop has changed. Yet the signature remains. In staff studies of fortified lines, Korea's ridges, Cold War river belts, city strongpoints, planners keep a column for deep concrete defeat. They remember what it took to crack a counterscarp to blind a gallery to turn a cupola into shrapnel and dust. The big shell taught the lesson to argue with reinforced concrete. You must arrive inside the target before you speak. Delay fuses. Deep penetration. Controlled detonation. Later, weapons-shaped charges, bunker-buster bombs, precision-guided penetrators inherit that grammar. The vocabulary is new. The syntax is the same. Museums take in the giants. A 240mm howitzer squats behind a rope at Fort Sill. Quiet, massive, a steel paragraph that needs no caption. Another sits under weathered skies at an ordnance park, its breech a black square, its trails like the bones of a great bird. Children count the rifling lands with their fingers. Veterans touch the paint with 2 fingers and then step back. Docents talk about recoil cylinders and separate loading ammunition. People nod without really grasping the old weight. That is all right. The thing explains itself. It is not a metaphor. It is a machine that once argued with cities. In archives, the paper trail breathes. Fire plans for Brest and Metz. Aerial photos with craters like thumbprints in concrete. Observer sketches of casemate faces annotated with small X marks, point of impact, point of failure. Engineers' marginalia about grillage and load spread under jackpads. Tube life charts taped into logbooks. The tone is always the same, flat, exact, unemotional. The effect was never theatrical. It was cumulative, measurable, hard to watch, and harder to endure. The decline is not a funeral, it is a handoff. Air-delivered ordnance grows the muscle that ground-delivered mass once provided. Precision replaces volume when friendlies are near. Satellites and lasers steal the guesswork. A pilot or a forward observer calls a set of numbers, and a smart shape bores into a roof that thought it was safe, then speaks in the cellar. The old behemoth would recognize the result, even if it could not understand the guidance package that delivered it. Ethics do not stand aside. After-action reports note civilian walls that were never the target but shared the block. Fortresses were often neighborhoods, railheads, workshops, water mains. Heavy shells did not ask who built the bricks. Neither do precision weapons when coordinates are wrong. Each generation writes its own cautions in the margins. Rules of engagement, restricted fire zones, no strike lists, and hopes that discipline is stronger than urgency when the fighting tightens. And yet, in certain terrains under certain roofs the old logic still breathes. Mountain tunnels, hardened galleries, underground depots. Concrete keeps its stubborn virtues. Commanders still keep a place in their heads for tools that enter and then speak. The mass may ride a wing now instead of a carriage, the fuse may wake on a timer set by a tablet rather than a wrench and a chart, but the intent is familiar. Inside first, detonate where it hurts most. Make the corridor collapse. Remove the field of fire. Give the assault 10 meters of mercy. Back at the rope in the museum, the howitzer wears sun and dust. A placard mentions Brest, mentions Metz, mentions urban fights where walls could think and shoot back. A veteran looks at the breech square, honest, unornamented, and sees a hallway opening where none existed. A child looks at the barrel and sees a dragon asleep. Both are close enough to the truth. Out in a motor pool far from any front, a modern crew runs drills on a leaner, faster tube. Digital fire control, self-propelled chassis, high-explosive smoke illumination, smart submunitions menu rather than meal. They move fast. They hide better. They shoot sooner. If they are called against concrete, they call friends overhead. The cycle is shorter. The footprint is lighter. The echo when it comes is just as final. And the ledger always the ledger. Weight versus effect. Time to emplace versus time saved in the breach. Risk to civilians versus the cost of leaving a fortress unbroken. Commanders still balance it. Planners still argue it. Crews still live with the sound and the dust. The 240mm is a chapter, not the book. but it is a chapter that taught the grammar of how you end a wall that intends to live forever. 23-28 February 1991, Al-Jaber and Taif airfields. Baghdad, Iraq. USAF provisional units employ improvised deep penetration bombs GBU. 27-28. Lineage against hardened targets while coalition ground forces advance. The ledger follows us into another century. The shapes are different. Fins, guidance kits, GPS whispers, but the intent is old. Inside first, then speak. A precision warhead dives where a shell once tunneled, and galleries that trusted concrete discover that concrete is a trust with limits. The 240mm listens from a museum rail and would understand the bruise left on a roof, even if it would not recognize the glide path that delivered it. Ethics sit beside the map now, not as an afterthought but as a column that commanders must initial before the first charge is lifted. The laws of armed conflict, targeting cycles, collateral damage estimates. These are not soft words. They are brakes applied with purpose. The behemoth age wrote its own cautions in pencil. Avoid hospitals, mark churches, keep fire short of the Red Cross flag, and still left walls down in neighborhoods that never voted in any war. Precision claims a kinder story, but mistakes are not a rumor. A coordinate transposed by one digit, a pattern of life read wrong, a door opened in the wrong block, and the ledger bleeds. Concrete still argues back. In mountains, in sub-basements, in tunnels threaded under cities, mass and geometry assert old rights. Modern artillery answers with modular charges, better fuses, and self-propelled mounts that emplace and vanish before counter-battery finds its range. Air answers with penetrators measured in guidance accuracy instead of bag charges. Sappers answer with line charges and thermal tools. None of them abolish the problem. They only frame it faster. So where would the 240mm belong if it rolled out of its rope and back into the line? Today. Not everywhere. Speed has become a kind of armor. Logistics are visible from space. A weapon that drinks road miles and asks for platforms and cranes advertises itself like a billboard. But in a theater where a hardened sight must be argued with from the ground, where weather owns the sky, where airspace is contested, where political risk throttles sorties, mass retains a voice, a commander with a narrow window and a hard target will still reach for a tool that can enter stone and make rooms forget their shapes. There is also the matter of time. Precision shortens the kill chain but lengthens the preparation. The ISR stack, the authorization ladder, the orbit management. A heavy gun once emplaced speaks on the minute. When an assault company has its boots in a ditch and a cupola will not shut up, the difference between 5 minutes and 45 is not theoretical. The old behemoth taught that a local, reliable hammer can be moral if it reduces the street-to-street butcher's bill. That is an ugly sentence. It is also the kind of sentence staff officers write in their heads and then do not put on paper. The shadow side never blinks. Big shells do not distinguish between a vaulted firing chamber and the wall a family sleeps behind if the map is wrong or the angle is misread. Debris clouds suffocate as efficiently as fragments kill. Ventilation collapses are indifferent to flags, languages, or prayers. The crew at the piece does not see faces. They see grids and coordinates and a fuse setting. The duty cycle protects them from doubt, which is why commanders must hold the doubt for them. It is not a fashionable burden. It is the oldest one in war. Legacy is not romance. The 240mm real inheritance is a way of thinking. Define the material. Define the geometry. Arrive inside. Detonate with purpose. Measure the effect. Adjust without vanity. The tools evolved, shaped charges, tandem warheads, programmable fuses, penetrators with steel noses and smart tails, but the intellectual spine did not. If you listen to a modern fire mission executed against a deep bunker, you can hear the echo delay, depth angle, back wall, vent path collapse. The old gun nods from across the decades. Where do these giants rest now? Parks, schools on field trips, ordnance museums where the docent's voice competes with wind over prairie grass. A child counts the rifling, loses patience, runs ahead. A veteran lingers hand flat on paint that covers steel that survived weather and wars and budgets. He remembers a hallway that opened. He remembers the taste of dust. He says nothing. The piece does not need him to. It has said its part, and the lessons. They write themselves in plain text. Do not promise miracles. Pay the logistics before you knock. Respect concrete. Respect civilians more. Train crews until ritual looks like grace under pressure. Keep the ledger honest weight for effect. Time for lives. Certainty for speed. Put the brakes on when excitement wants a shortcut. None of this is new. All of it is easy to forget. The camera pulls back Brest stone under Atlantic light, Metz rain on Glacis desert night over a city grid 1,000 miles away, and 30 years later, different wars, same arguments. The 240mm Howitzer M1 does not claim the last word. It never did. It only insisted on being heard when walls thought they were immortal. In the end, that is its legacy, a proof that even the proudest fortress has a seam, and that finding it is craft, not theatre.